Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Stephen.
The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert Show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from experts on such topics as legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to our experts in community association law, estate planning law, tax relief, Medicare, public insurance adjusters, neuropathy treatment, business brokers, and personal injury law, along with many other topics. Now here's your host for the last 17 years, Steve O.
Good morning. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show, where we bring you the finest experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Hey, I got to tell you, our expert this morning, I am so proud of. He is on the West Coast at 7 a.m. in the morning there, and here he is bright and early. We're talking about mesothelioma, and it actually took me a year to be able to pronounce that. Such an important topic, and I want to thank everybody for the questions you send in. We're now also on TikTok, so we have to welcome that audience. Good morning, attorney Michael Mandelbrot.
Good morning, Stephen. You're correct. It's about 7 a.m. out here in California, bright and early. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. Look forward to speaking with the listeners, answering some questions, and hoping I can help some people out there with asbestos diseases and lung cancer and/or, of course, mesothelioma. And you pronounced it perfectly, Stephen.
I can't believe it took me all these years, Michael, and I got to tell you, I've learned so much from you. And, you know, I've got such a soft part of my heart. And I know that if not all of your clients usually end up passing on, and that has got to be, to me, the hardest thing. You get a relationship with these people knowing that their time is near. And here you are. You've got to be an attorney that has such a great heart for your clients. And we so appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate that, Stephen. It's true. Our clients are often terminally ill, or they come to us even after somebody has passed away. So there is always a tremendous amount of emotion in these things. I always realize these people all had a long life before contacting me, friends, families, and a life just like me, where we can't turn the pages back. We can only turn them forward. And, I just try and move forward and help these people and, give them something to be positive about in a very difficult situation. But yes, we definitely see a lot of people who pass away. And I mean, just yesterday I got 2 calls, but those were both actually wrongful death, where it's the children calling because their father or their mother had passed away. And so we get a lot of those too, and it's quite difficult. I will say that from a legal perspective, it helps so much if victims contact us while they are alive. I know that every family, the most important thing is their health when somebody gets sick, and their treatment, and not worrying about lawyers. But from a legal perspective, when somebody with an asbestos disease passes away, before a case is done, you lose your best witness, because there is no better person to talk about or tell you about how that person was exposed to asbestos than the victim. They know where they work typically, they know the job sites, they know the locations, where family members, are often, in essence, guessing, and it takes us maybe 6 months to a year to fully investigate all the places these people were exposed to asbestos once they pass away. So if they get us living, it sure does help. It
Yeah.
sure does help.
So I'm just, it's amazing how AI works, Michael. I'm looking over our TikTok, and TikTok is promoting it during the show, and they spelled mesothelioma exactly right, asbestos right. That's pretty amazing, because I sure didn't spell it for them or send it to them.
No, I'm excited that they're doing that. I would welcome any of the listeners or viewers to contact me anytime if they've got questions, but hopefully you and I will get through a lot of those today.
Yeah. Hey, so Michael, there's people who still do not understand. I mean, it's kind of hard, maybe a friend or a family member, and you yourself don't understand. Tell people what you do when it comes to your firm representing these people.
Sure. And I think, we keep saying mesothelioma and asbestos mesothelioma. Let me quickly define for people out there what mesothelioma is, and then I will explain exactly what I do. Because we mentioned this word mesothelioma, and what that is, it is a terminal cancer to the lining of the lung, not the lung itself. That would be I'm talking about plural mesothelioma. There's really two main types that we see. And what it is, it's a cancer to the lining of the organ, not the organ itself. So we've got plural mesothelioma, and then there is what's known as peritoneal mesothelioma, which is the lining of the abdomen. This is a unique type of cancer. Just like small cell or lung cell, mesothelioma is a unique type of cancer. But what also makes it very unique is that there is only one known cause of mesothelioma, one proven medical cause, and that is exposure to asbestos. So when somebody gets mesothelioma, a terminal disease where they are going to die 100% of the time, it is a disease that we know is caused by asbestos. So what we do a lot of the time, in most of our cases, is we don't often act as much as lawyers, but as investigators in trying to determine all of the locations an individual was exposed to asbestos during their lifetime. And we're not talking about, in the most recent 5 or 10 years, because there's a unique way that mesothelioma, if somebody's exposed, there's a latency before a development of disease, typically 10 to 15 years minimum. So we are always looking at, say, the year 2000 or before. How were they exposed to asbestos? Now, critical years are the 70s, the 80s. A lot of our clients are much older. They're in their 80s, they're in their 70s, because asbestos was much more prevalent in the 70s and 80s in construction. Problem is, once it was put in the 70s and 80s, never came out. And in most cases, it's still in there unless these buildings were torn down. So A lot of what we do is investigate and determine how somebody was exposed to asbestos. We have to, of course, file lawsuits. There's different ways we can get people compensation. But these cases, and you hear about them, I mean, there's verdicts all the time that range from $5 million to $70 million in individual cases. These cases are valuable. The company's conduct is often punitive, meaning these companies knew that asbestos was in their products. They knew it was hazardous. They knew people were being exposed, and they did nothing. And that's why oftentimes we can often get punitive damages in some of these cases as well. So these are very, very valuable cases. Unlike, and I don't want to say unlike, but there are other asbestos cases which aren't as valuable, but they're still great cases. People who have a disease known as asbestosis, or if somebody has lung cancer, oftentimes we're able to medically put it together, and we're able to determine that that person's lung cancer was caused in part by exposure to asbestos, and we can give them compensation. But there's nothing like a mesothelioma case. That's why you see people advertising on TV. They're multi-million-dollar cases. And that's why many lawyers in my field, not me, will only take those cases because they know they're going to make the most money from those cases. We try and help everybody, asbestosis, lung cancer, or mesothelioma. But hopefully that gives you a good idea of what we do.
Michael, talking about making money, you do so much work before you even realize your first time because of the way how you charge your clients. And they don't sign up with you, become a client, and they write you a check. It doesn't work that way. Explain how your payments work.
Well, what I like to tell clients that I've spoken to, there's a few terms that I like to use. One is, you hear about lawyers and billing and hourlies and minutes and, requirements. There is none of that with the representation of victims of asbestos disease. Every case that I've ever handled has been taken on what's known as a contingency. And why that's important is I tell clients I've never sent out a bill in 30 years. We don't bill clients. We don't keep our time. We don't keep our hours. We have, and this is one of the terms I like to use, we have skin in the game with every client who we represent, meaning the better we do for our clients, the better we do for our office. So our goal is to obviously get our clients as much as possible. And that's why other lawyers who bill time, they're worried about billing as much time as possible because that's how they make money, not us. We want to get the clients as much money as possible. We're incentivized to assist these clients. So all cases are taken on a contingency where the lawyers get a percentage of the settlement, say typically 1/3. But before you see any money, there's always thousands and thousands of dollars of investment in the case and time, which we don't bill, in order to see that recovery. Like, for example, the wrongful death caller yesterday, I would have to work that case up medically to determine if it is an asbestos-related lung cancer. I'd have to work it up exposure-wise to determine whether or not they had qualifying exposures to asbestos. That's going to require medical experts. We pay for that. That's going to require ordering Social Security records, work records, job records, all of these different things. We pay for all that. We put it all together, and once we are able to get somebody money, like I said, I've probably spent about 15 hours and maybe $2,000 to $5,000 before we even see a penny. And so, and that may be a 6 to 9 month time period, depending on what type of case it is, maybe even a year. And in some of those cases, like I said, we may not make a lot of money because they're asbestos cases. But something that we've talked about a lot is most people with asbestos-related diseases were blue-collar workers. They're from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. They can't afford lawyers. They don't know even know what a retainer is, probably, or to pay a retainer. And to ask these people who are going through a serious medical crisis to now reach in their pocket, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it should work. So all cases are handled on a contingency, and oftentimes 6 months to a year before we see a dime.
I share this with many times on your show because I'm so proud of you as an attorney. We had what is considered one of the top mesothelioma law firms in the country. The principal of the firm owned the baseball team, and they contacted us wanting to do a show like Michael does. But with Michael, we do the whole country with him. But he said to me, now remember, this is a competitor, said, I got to tell you, your expert is doing an incredible job relating about meso and asbestos. So I just wanted to tell you, even though we can't get to show, that you've got a great expert. And I thought that was an incredible compliment, Michael, because most of the time those calls I get, they're downplaying who the expert is, and they're saying that they're better.
Yeah. In a lot of these cases, since exposures, like let's say, for example, my client was in the Navy for 15 years. So that means he would have been exposed to asbestos in multiple states. He might have stopped in a shipyard in Florida, and then he stopped in a shipyard in New York, and then he came to California and he had an overhaul of a ship. And in situations like that, we can represent them, or we can file a case. They've got jurisdiction in any one of those states. And while I've got many disagreements with a lot of the upper echelon of lawyers in our field, I've also worked with a lot of them, not the ones I've got disagreements with, but I've worked with a lot of lawyers around the country. And I do think I know who you're talking about. They have been in asbestos litigation for about 40 years. They are a very quality firm. And I think their firm represents how asbestos has really changed over the years, because when they first started, and when most of us first started 30 or 40 years ago, most all of the cases were out of the shipyards and the steel mills and the refineries. But a lot of those steel mills have closed, a lot of those shipyards have closed, and a lot of the people who worked in those places have now unfortunately passed on. That firm, and so they're a great firm, and yes, I do think I know who you're talking about, and so thank you very much for the compliment. But I'm sure I've got as many critics as I do friends out there, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Steve.
Michael, we are getting a lot of questions on the TikTok. People want to know, has anyone gone to prison, or are they just fined? Because you said that they knew about this.
Well, it's a great question, because there's two types of cases that can be filed. I'm a civil lawyer, and that means you go after money typically. in a civil case. But then there is what's known as criminal cases. And those are handled by, local DAs and attorney generals, and they file cases they file criminal cases. And when you ask if anybody has ever gone to jail, no, I haven't been involved in those, because those would be criminal cases
Right.
versus civil cases. But I always read up on asbestos cases. And I have definitely seen, what I've seen would be like a contractor who removes asbestos, like now, for example. They're working on a job now, or last year, or last month, and it was clearly asbestos, and they didn't take the precautions necessary, and people who worked in the buildings got exposed. Those are the types of companies that I have seen face some criminal liability. Companies in the last couple of years who handle, touch, remove asbestos. And this is actually good for the listeners. It would be like if you have asbestos in your home, it's very expensive to remove it. And if a contractor who's not licensed in asbestos removal comes in and says, oh, don't worry about it, I'll take care of that for you, they remove that asbestos, and you don't see all that dust floating in your home. But then you do a little research and you say, oh, geez, I didn't realize that stuff could cause cancer. And you realize that this guy who removed it, an unlicensed contractor, ended up exposing your entire family to this asbestos material. That may be the type of thing that a DA might look at. Someone who is exposing people now. The companies years ago, it's all money. All of the executives pretty much got away with it. It's very rare. I mean, they may have lost their jobs, lost their positions, but you don't see, like Dow Chemical or Union Carbide executives going to jail for this. I do remember a case out of Italy where the executives were criminally charged and convicted, but I remember that conviction was overturned. That was related to asbestos cement pipe, and those people never did go to jail. It is possible. Good question. Not for me. That's criminal. I'm civil.
Okay, let me go to the next question. This is a good question. Most of your clients originated from a certain city. Can you share those cities that found that mesothelioma, that they attracted this disease? Are they usually all the same cities where ships were built?
Great question. You 100% saw a higher incidence of mesothelioma in locations where there were shipyards. And so what we're talking about is the coast, typically and originally, California, Florida, New York. Those are the big ones. Bremerton, Washington had a huge shipyard. A lot of cases out of there. But these individuals didn't always live in those locations. And so a lot of times, while you'll see a lot of cases from exposures in those locations, like, for example, you see clusters of cases sometimes in weird places like St. Louis, for example, or Chicago, a lot of steel mills, factories in those locations, but oftentimes also a lot of defendants whose their corporate principal place of business is in those locations. So that's a place you can sue them. So you do see a higher incidence on the coast, but it can be anywhere. Those are the big states primarily. A lot of states have actually, and you'll see this primarily in what they call red states, have set up rules to set up these to protect these companies, and it becomes very difficult to bring a lawsuit and sue companies. California doesn't have that same protection. Most all law firms who do this, or many, I'd say about 20 since I started, who weren't based in California, have set up an office out here. States that aren't good to bring cases, believe it or not, Texas has set up laws to really protect companies. Ohio, Montana, those are three that Arizona is not a great state. And that's why you don't see a lot of asbestos cases in those states anymore. If someone can bring one in California or New York, typically those are the best jurisdictions.
What about, is Michael's asbestos still being used?
Not that we know of. I mean, it may be used for military uses where it's absolutely necessary and encapsulized. We've gone back and forth with the EPA, putting an outright ban on the use of asbestos in the United States. But I do remember that, they've gone back and forth on a ban with exceptions for special uses. Now, I say that in that, is this not, probably not intentionally is what I would say. But, and something, I think is worthy of talking about is, in the past couple of years, we have discovered that different mines where talc was mined. It's a separate chemical than asbestos, a separate fiber that's used. But these talc mines were contaminated with asbestos. So many companies, like, for example, Johnson & Johnson, who were using talc in their products, oftentimes were also using asbestos in their products. And so recently, Johnson & Johnson, it was discovered there was asbestos in their baby powder up to very, very recently. If you go into any store now, you'll see a similar looking bottle to Johnson & Johnson's baby powder, but it's not called Johnson & Johnson's baby powder anymore. Not on the shelf. But what I wanted to add to that, I mean, I was just reading last week, children's toys pulled from shelves because of asbestos.
Wow.
And so, for example, there might be a toy, and I don't want to just say, let's just say it's made in Bangladesh, China, Vietnam, who knows where it's made. And it's like a scientist kit. And in that kit, it's got a fingerprint powder that you could use. And it's like a kid's toy, a private investigator kit. So, for example, they found that fingerprinting powder had asbestos in it. So when kids were pounding their finger in it and trying to do a fingerprint for their little investigations, toy investigations, so they've had to pull those from the shelves. And I've seen it in tons of cosmetics that were used. So I don't think companies are intentionally using it anymore. But when you asked, is it being used? I get surprised all the time. And the answer is, I guess, yes. Yes. Wow. And not purposely by these companies. But if you're going to put a product out on the market that potentially could have a known hazard in it, it is your job to test and determine whether or not that hazard exists. And so these companies have the ability to test. They don't. They're buying these products probably from overseas, and oftentimes they do have asbestos in them, where asbestos isn't banned in China, for example, or Russia, and it's used extensively.
This is from Bobby in Baltimore. I am surprised there's not more shows like this. There's not too much you can find in a 60-second commercial. I so appreciate this show. My son is a welder on ships. The U.S. is trying to crank out as many ships as they can to catch up with China. Do I need to worry about my son?
I don't think so now. And if it was 40 years ago, 100% yes. You know, welders were right in the thick of it in boiler rooms where there was asbestos used on insulation pipes. They used it on gasket. We found that welding rods used to have asbestos in them, certain types of Lincoln welding rods. The shields that welders used to cover their faces had asbestos in them. The gloves they used had asbestos in them.
Wow.
But that would be the perfect example where they have now come up with suitable replacements. And I do not believe that asbestos is being used in the construction of these ships. And I will say what her son is doing, is wonderful for our country, because we used to be the leader in shipbuilding around the world, the United States. And that is not the case anymore. And we've lost those skilled trades, the welders, the pipe fitters working in shipyards. What he's doing, I think, is a good thing. I mean, there may be other chemicals in there that I'm not aware of. But of course, wear a mask. But any new products they're using for new ships should not have asbestos in them, unless it's one of those very few military exceptions. And then I think a lot of precautions would be taken.
Another great show. This is from our TikTok audience. I read somewhere about these popcorn ceiling that had asbestos in it. Is there any truth to that?
100% yes. That was primarily the responsibility of a company that some of you may have heard from, and I think it may have been the same company related to the Aaron Brockovich movie. That was W.R. Grace. They made a product, the name escapes me, but essentially that was blended into a product that became this popcorn ceiling. They were used all over the United States. There were central locations in every big city where this product was shipped. It was a good insulator. It was quick to install, but the problem is it had asbestos. I grew up with it in my condo as well. I lived in a condominium, and I remember I would jump when I could touch the ceiling and try and rain the snow down on my brother. I would be concerned if it's still in the homes. I still see homes in it. Today, what you will find, if you see, is that most people put an encapsulation or a coating over that popcorn ceiling, almost like a sealant, so it can't become dusty. That is the cheaper way to get to remove it. But I think most of the listeners out there, if you've been staring at those popcorn ceilings for a few years, they're sort of unsightly now. They look good back in the day, but they don't look that good anymore. So, the recommendation would be to pay up and try and get rid of them. But that's an example of where you really got to take precautions. Wet it down, glove bag everything, change your clothes in the setting, hose yourself down, get it off your head, all of these things and precautions that they have to do. That is a product, it's interesting because popcorn ceiling, another similar, let's just say drywall, taping mud. It's so many homes were built with drywall in the walls, drywall, especially the fire-rated drywall between the garages, had a high percentage of asbestos, but even higher was the joint compound to seal the two pieces of wallboard together. That's in you know, probably every home built before 1975 with drywall, they've got asbestos drywall in their home. It's a concern, it's encapsulated, but it's not like the ceilings where, if it's not encapsulated, you just touch it and it rains down on you and you can see the dust. So, good question. Popcorn ceilings, encapsulate if you can, or abate and just remove it altogether. Scrape that right out of there.
Michael, here's a question we're getting both on YouTube now and on TikTok. And again, we want to thank you for your questions. Share your live. That really helps us. We don't ask for any gifts at all. But there's a lot of people who are talking about their relatives who died from lung cancer, who worked on these ships, and they want to know, can you still go back and sue these companies, or is it too late because the person has already passed?
Those sort of calls are some of the hardest calls that I take, because every state has what's known as a statute of limitation, which restricts, like for example, in California, I think the way the law is written is a wrongful death case based on asbestos exposure must be filed within 1 year of the date of death. So, I get calls all the time where my uncle, my dad, my cousin passed away 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And it's so difficult because here's the problem. When somebody first gets diagnosed with lung cancer, it is so rare that that doctor is going to tell them that, hey, did you know that that lung cancer was caused by asbestos? Or there's a chance. The first thing the doctor's going to ask is, hey, did you ever smoke cigarettes?
Yes.
Were you ever around smoking? Because that's the first thing they look at. And even if that person only smoked for 2 years, 3 years when they were a kid, that's what typically gets in the victim's head. It was probably caused by smoking. Nobody's ever told them, hey, did you know because you worked in the shipyards, you were in the military, you worked in the steel mills, or however you were exposed, asbestos could have caused this. It's so rare that personal physicians, pathologists, oncologists, doctors tell victims, unless it's mesothelioma, that their disease was caused by asbestos. Lung cancer is the best example. So I got a call yesterday. My dad died 5 years ago. And that's one that's going to be tough. Now, like in California, there are exceptions to the rule. In the exception that we've created and that we try and wiggle through is to say, look, that 1 year case should be filed within 1 year. That 1 year doesn't start running until that person knew that disease was caused by asbestos. And so let's just say somebody died 2 years ago. We're past the 1 year, and their death certificate says lung cancer, and nobody's ever told them that it was asbestos. I'll look at that case and I'll work it up medically. And if my doctor then reviews the medical records and says, I think this is an asbestos-related lung cancer, I will use that date as the date when the statute starts running. So that might be 2.5 years after, but the client didn't know. But it's always a fight with the defendants. No one's going to say, all right, even though you filed this 2.5 years later, you got through the exception. But we can get through that way. I want to say, if somebody died of lung cancer within the last 5 or 6 years, call me. We'll review it. If it's in the last year, I would say 100% yes,
Right.
we should be able to help them. 2 years, probably. Once you get 3 years, probably as well. Once we get outside of 3 years, it becomes more difficult. But that's the type of thing where, hey, look, these people were, I look at it as these people were entitled to money. It's my job as a lawyer, even if I don't make a ton of money, that they get it. Their doctor never told them they had asbestos cancer. He should have. They should have said something when that person was first diagnosed. And so, I've sort of taken on this obligation as a lawyer to help these people. And so that's what we do.
And
So
these
yeah.
companies have put money away for this.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about that. That's true. A lot of these companies have put money away for this, and those trust funds is what I think you're referring to. A lot of them do permit you to file a claim within 3 years of the date of death. So it's even longer than California, and possibly exceptions to those as well.
Well, it's amazing, Michael, is because we do all different types of health and legal topics, and it's amazing that so many people want to know about this topic. I'm looking at the numbers right now, and I'm just blown away what an interest people have in this topic.
Well, it's something that affects everyone. I don't care if you're young or old. Even if you didn't work in it, you might have lived in a home that has asbestos. You were born in a hospital that probably has asbestos in it. You drove in a car that probably had asbestos in it. You went to school in a school that definitely, unless you went, we're in a wood schoolhouse, the old wood schoolhouses. But yeah. And it's funny, I've got the records for every school, college, and university in the country. And you throw your school out there, I'll bet you I can show you there's asbestos, whether it's in the drywall, the insulation, the pipes, the flooring, that old floor tile, the particle board, that ceiling board. It was in every school. So it's something that can touch everybody. And it's not like it's definitely not the sexiest topic. Hey, who wants to talk about asbestos?
Yeah.
And meso and death? No, it's not. But it is something that does touch a lot of people. So it doesn't surprise me.
Michael, do you have to pay taxes on a settlement?
No, because you pay taxes on income. It's called income tax. That's what we all pay. I pay it, you pay it, and everybody pays it. When you get a settlement in asbestos, it is called a personal injury settlement. It is not viewed under the IRS code as income. So when I send a client an $8,000 check, yes, they've got to report it to the IRS, but it's not in the same place you report income. And that $8,000 goes right in your pocket, right? All 8,000, none to the IRS. That's a personal injury settlement.
Here's a question I don't think has ever come up before. This is on our TikTok. Does a lawsuit recovery impact my military disability?
And that is a great question because I get asked that all the time. And no, it doesn't. It's completely separate from your military disability. That comes from the government. That's whose pocket. The government is paying you because you were disabled in part because of your time in the military. Now, of course, the asbestos is going to intersect because you're also going after these companies because you're saying you were exposed to asbestos while you were in the Navy and these companies exposed you. But they are two separate sources of recovery. It does not affect the disability. Oftentimes it's rare, but oftentimes it can help me because people will come to me and say, hey, I just got a 100% asbestos disability. Can I file a case? And for those people, I don't have to work them up medically because they've already gotten a 100% VA disability. I just got to prove how they were exposed to asbestos. And in that case, I know a lot of it probably came from the military since it's VA. So it doesn't impact a VA disability. It doesn't impact a pension. We don't go after employers. Like, say somebody worked 50 years for a company and they were exposed to asbestos every day while working for that company. And now they've got mesothelioma. And there isn't any question that the company they work for is in part responsible. We can't go after that company unless maybe it's in Pennsylvania. It's a workman's compensation case, which is, again, totally separate from an asbestos case. That's going after a lawyer. We go after the companies that actually made, sold, supplied, and distributed and installed asbestos products. That's who we go after, not employers and not the government. And one quick aside, what you will see, Steve, oftentimes, say there's a verdict in an asbestos case and somebody was in the Navy, they may even attribute a percentage of the fault to the Navy and say it was their fault. And so even in that case, it doesn't affect the disability. It doesn't affect the settlement, even though they're responsible, the Navy. It's totally separate compensation for the clients. People who do get a VA disability for either lung cancer or asbestos and they don't file a lawsuit absolutely should, because it's a second source of recovery and it's different. A VA disability is a monthly amount. Who knows how much it is? Let's say it's $900 a month, $1,200 a month, whatever it is. That is a monthly. These settlements are, completely different. If someone has lung cancer, they may get $500,000 in settlements over a 1-year period. It's not going to be every month they get an amount. Settlements, that's not how, once the case settles, you get paid.
I think you just answered. A lot of people want to know, do you have to file a lawsuit to get any kind of recovery? But I think you
No, you don't. We can get much more money if we do file a lawsuit for a client, because we can go after solvent defendants. But these many clients who do have lung cancer or mesothelioma, the thought is, we don't want to go through a lawsuit. We don't want to deal with defendants and depositions and judges and courthouses. Whatever the client wants, if that's what they want, it's fine. We can still get them significant compensation from these trust funds, depending on where they were exposed to asbestos. There may be exceptions, tough cases, remote exposures, but yes, we can get them money without filing a lawsuit. Lawyers will often try and push clients into a lawsuit because they make more money.
Right.
Whatever the client wants, that's what we want.
Well, the most important question is, Michael, how do people reach you?
You can reach me a variety of ways. I am also on TikTok. I'm going to try and quickly look up my TikTok handle. Mesothelioma.pro is my website. 415-895-5175 is direct to my office. 415-895, 1-800-970-DUST. And on TikTok at Mike_lawyer_CA. you'll see my logo, the Asbestos Legal Center, at Mike_lawyer_CA, meaning California. That's how you'll find me, Stephen. And I thank you again. It's been great talking.
Michael's with us every month. And for those of you who missed part of the show, you can go to iHeart or Spotify or YouTube, and you can either watch or listen to the show. Michael, people love your show. Great. I mean, people, I want to thank our audience. Great questions today, and we will see you next month.
The show flew by today. See you next month. I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks, buddy. That's attorney Michael Mandelbrot. Folks, I've never seen an attorney that cares so much about his clients. Give him a call. If you think maybe a friend or a family member or even yourself might be affected by asbestos or mesothelioma. And that's going to do it. Hey, we'll be back this afternoon at 5 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to be talking about Medicare. Big topic. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.